This program is brought to you by Connie Dodo of Connie Dodo Realty Group, 119 Pleasant Street, Methuen. When you want results, don't make a move without us.
Welcome to Dodo Real Estate View. As most of you know, we get questions and topics from people that you'd like to see viewed on the show here. This is a real estate talk show, and today we have Paul Russell, attorney Paul Russell, who is on Broadway in Methuen. And Paul has been in business, how many years, Paul?
Since 1996, 20 years now.
Wow. And in real estate is...
That's our sole concentration. That's what we've always done, and we've tried to just specialize in all real estate conveyancing work.
As you know, both of us, I mean, we do a lot of work together in terms of with buyers and sellers of homes. And just maybe if we could just go over the sequence of if a buyer was purchasing a home, how would you fit in terms of the legal services?
Sure, I appreciate that. I'd like to preference it first that obviously most of the time as a buyer enters into the process of trying to purchase a home, whether they be a first-time home buyer or someone who's looking for an investment home, especially in today's market, trying to capture some of the deals that are out there. I normally see that the course of event is that they'll be introduced to me through a real estate agent, meaning that person has either sought out the help of yourself or someone else engaged to be able to introduce them to the property. That seems to be normally the first step. And then obviously to make that an enticing buyer for someone who's selling a unit, I do see that the second step seems to be that they're somehow get connected either through the internet or advertisement with some type of financing vehicle. So when the buyer comes to me, they're usually a little overwhelmed, but usually educated enough to know what they're looking for. So my position usually starts when the offer or the purchase and sale agreement stage has been reached. So the broker really has done an awful lot of work with that, we'll call it a customer client, prior to me being introduced to him or her. So of course the legal facet then would turn into the offer, which is a binding contract because it's someone putting a presentation together to a seller that they want to purchase their home, and they're going to bind it with a dollar amount.
And that's a good point, because most people think an offer is not a legal document.
It is.
We hear that daily.
True. It is, in fact, a legally binding document once the terminology is the consideration is paid, meaning as long as there is a dollar amount that's exchanged, and that is a binding contract. And the courts have certainly ruled that. And in many cases, sellers have been forced to, even though they have cold feet and maybe would like to back out of the deal, have been forced to sell their home, as well as buyers have also been held to it. And as you know, there's usually a nominal amount of money, but in some cases it could be, $500 or $1,000 that would bind that offer, the first stage of the contract. And that's hard-earned money, so it's always susceptible to being lost. And certainly that's not something that we want to see happen.
So there's been court cases where people have had situations where they say, I don't want to sell.
Oh, sure there are. I mean, this is Massachusetts. It's a court case for everything in the world, but most definitely there are specific cases, in fact, on record that say that someone can be forced to sell that property, especially the longer it takes for someone to make a decision of when they're going to back out. Because as you may or may not, the viewers understand that from the time the offer is signed to the next stage, which is the purchase and sale agreement stage, there's usually that 10-day period. And I know we can get into that further, but yeah.
I mean, a lot of it, as you said, I mean, sequence of the events from person purchasing to offer to purchase and sale and so on and so forth. I mean, I think that's where you step in from when the offer is on the table and you review the purchase and sale
Correct.
on behalf.
And I do think that the correct stage is at that point, because I do not believe that the real estate broker should be the one exposing himself or herself to answering any of the legal questions that may arise. We all have our fiduciary duties and obligations. So as the offer, and especially the purchase and sale agreement, contain specific terms and conditions, albeit sometimes they're very generic, I don't think that the real estate broker wants to, nor should they be involved in answering those questions.
And I think that's one thing that, in talking with the agents in my office, we always say, you know what, have an attorney review. We're not attorneys. We're
That's
here
correct.
to make sure that customers get the house that they want, or they sell their house. So that's an important piece. I mean, in selecting a real estate attorney,
Well, I think you should always select myself. That's first and
Of
foremost.
course.
But after that, I mean, there are several people in the area who do this for a living, mostly full-time. My office just happens to be geared, because we made this decision back in 1996, because the timing was great, that this is all we concentrate in. And primarily that's because of the pressures that are put on by the real estate agents to make sure that you're accessible. It's very difficult when you're trying to get an answer, or your buyer or seller are trying to get an answer, and you hear that someone's always tied up in court. We live in that such fast-paced world that we've created, that we really do expect and demand answers almost instantaneously. Oh, I think so.
Yeah,
But justifiably so, because time will pass you right by, especially if you have someone who's maybe in the circumstances a seller is entertaining multiple offers, and should we put this with a contingency? Should we not? So I think there's a lot of justification for that.
Right. And I think that's an important point, as you said, to be with a real estate attorney, that's what they solely do, because of the accessibility, like you said. I mean, there are times, I know I can pick up the phone and get you at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, or whatever, if there's a situation happening. So that's key, if you're just concentrating just on real estate.
Well, I think so. I mean, every documentation that I have, whether it be a business card or letterhead, always has my cell phone number. I understand that most people work all day, and it's difficult to get things answered. And I'm sure when you're showing properties, a lot of that takes place on Saturdays and Sundays and evenings. So the availability to extend out and be accessible to that customer, I think, is important. And I should point out at this point, we'll have a lot more to go over this evening, but a lot of times people will say, well, lawyer, immediately they think of the cost factor. And I think it's important at the onset of the show tonight to understand that the cost factor may not be a cost factor. So as we get into when you're selecting your lenders and things of that nature, and good faith estimates, and who pays for cost, we can elaborate it a little more. But I think it would be a falsehood to tell the viewers that don't call an attorney because you're going to get charged for that service. I can only speak for myself, of course, but I think it's all built into the big picture.
And how services are wrapped. I mean, and that's the thing, is a lot of people, there's a cost for everything we do. We know that there's a cost associated, especially a good service you provide. But I think we have to look at, in the long run, it could be more cost effective to have an attorney than not, because you could be going down a road that you're going to be paying more money for it. So I think that's a point that we need to look at. In talking about cost, we know that a buyer, they purchase a home, they're ready for their purchase and sale. There's a cost that's tied with an attorney's fee. Like you said, good faith estimate. So you may want to talk a bit about that and how you
that second
package it.
Stage that I mentioned a little earlier ago, about when a potential buyer is meeting with a mortgage company or a local bank or whatever the institution may be, who's actually going to put the money up to buy the property. One of the things that is by federal law required that party receive a good faith estimate. We refer to it as a GFE. But the good faith estimate has been revised many, many times over. And the version that we have now has become that is going to truly be what the numbers are. There's a lot of times in years gone by, people would say, well, they told me it was going to be this, then I found out that, it was 4 points and I had to pay this cost and this cost. Those days are pretty much gone.
Thank God. I remember being at the table with
Too many
customers,
surprises.
and you're on the phone with the mortgage person saying, wait a minute, what's happening? So I think it's a...
So the good faith estimate is something that's provided to the customer up front now from the loan originator And I think it's within either 2 or 10 days or that very short time frame from the signing of the application. So those numbers truly do hold to the point where if you get from there to the closing, there is only allowed to be a 10% disparity between those numbers. So if someone, in the old days, we'll use the word unscrupulous, had changed numbers, then that person who was the bank would now be responsible to pay that money. So there's really a penalty put upon them. So whenever economics is involved and money's involved, things change quick. So because the bank or the lender or the mortgage company does not want to be responsible, what you see now in the good faith estimate at the very beginning, that borrower has great confidence to know that's what the numbers are going to be at the closing table. But the good faith estimate tells them all of the numbers. It breaks down for them what their escrows will be, what the attorney fees are going to be, what the title insurance is going to be, what the recording fees. So things have become very fine-tuned to give the protection where it belongs to the buyer, which I think has been a marvelous thing.
And again, most people, like you said, now they know up front what it's going to cost them. We don't have to do any guessing or sitting at the table calling the mortgage company and saying, why is the percentage 5% when
That's
quoted at
correct.
4%?
Yeah.
So that's great. Talking about title, maybe we can talk a little bit
Sure.
about title insurance and
Yeah.
how that works, because there's a lot of misunderstanding on that as well.
Sure there is. I think when we talk about title, what's important to understand is when someone is, and we're gearing right now pretty much towards a buyer. So a buyer's looking to purchase a home, whether it be in Methuen, Lawrence, it doesn't make any difference. Obviously, it's very important to determine that the person who says, I own the property, really does own the property. And we also need to make sure that that person, being the seller, has always paid all of their taxes. There's no liens on the property. If they say that they have no mortgages on the property, we always need to make sure that that's not the case, because in most cases, people do have mortgages on the property. So the title examination that's performed is done by an independent contractor. We happen to use a firm that is made up of 2 lawyers because they are doubly insulated because they're insured as a contractor and they're also insured as an attorney. So they will do a 50-year background on all of the things that have transpired on that particular property for the past 50 years to make sure that, in fact, it is what we call a clear, clean, marketable title. Because when you're buying something, you certainly don't want to buy the headache or the skeleton. So the title examination is a very integral part that ensures the bank, because remember, the bank is loaning the money, the bank doesn't want to take anything that's a headache, and the buyer, that what they're getting is a valuable commodity.
Do most people that do title searches go back the 50 years? I mean,
Well,
what is the standard of, you know?
The standard is 50 years. I mean,
Okay.
that is really the rule of thumb. 50 years is in order to certify the title. So a lot of times you'll see if there's a property, let's say, in the state of New Hampshire, just to give a little bit of a difference, it's not a requirement in the state of New Hampshire for an attorney to close your loan. In the state of Massachusetts, it must be a licensed attorney, again, for that insurance purposes for malpractice. In Massachusetts, the attorney issues a certification of the title, which under the law says that we said that we've gone back to 50 years, so we need to. In the state of New Hampshire, a title company, for instance, does not issue a certificate of title. They don't have that extra insulation that somebody can fall back on.
I know we've seen, past few years back, a lot of discharges did not happen with mortgages from prior. I mean, we're seeing less of that now. Would that be, you pick it up from a title search?
Well, the title search is certainly the vehicle that allows that to be picked up, and it does bring a lot of surprises to a lot of sellers' faces, because what happens is when you buy the home, until you go to sell it or refinance it, maybe in the interim, nobody else ever does the title exam again. So you've relied upon the last person, which could be 5, 6, 7, 20 years ago, to see what is still effectively showing as outstanding. So as you mentioned, we've had so many lending institutions have simply gone out of business. A person maybe had a mortgage with one of those companies. That company's non-existent. But maybe before the doors closed, they never signed the discharge and it never made it the way to the registry of deeds. So what we have found, because of the fast pace that everything was transpiring several years ago, people are now selling again. And all of those skeletons and sins from 7, 10 years ago show up, and they need to be corrected. And you do feel for the seller, because obviously the seller would have no idea as a regular layperson what's up here. So there is a way to correct everything. It just may take a little bit of time, a little bit of diligence, but it goes back to that time being of the essence, who's available to get it done and how quick they can get it done. And did you put those people together in a timely fashion to enable to ward off any disasters?
Right. And when we talked about title search, let's talk a bit about title insurance.
Sure.
You know, and how.
Yeah. Title insurance, it's ironic, even myself. Most people don't like even hearing the word of insurance companies because it just means somebody's taking money out of your pocket. Title insurance is an insurance company, make no doubt about it. It has nothing to do with the homeowners or the fire insurance or if the gutter gets ripped off the house. Title insurance protects the land which the home actually sits upon. Therefore, if I do a closing hypothetically today, a year from now that seller goes to sell the property and the other attorney did the title examination and for the new buyer and says, well, this is missing, this didn't get recorded, they missed the water bill. As with your medical insurance and your car insurance, if you get in a fender bender or you fall down and you break your arm, it's always nice to be able to call the insurance agent and say, take care of it, or give your insurance card at the emergency room and take care of it. If you've purchased what's called owner's title insurance, which 99% of the people do, most people don't know what it is, but it's always part of the package, the company that insured that land will step in and pay the claim. Nothing better for a seller to be able to say, well, okay, you know, Paul missed it, Paul did something wrong, this person did, my title insurance company is going to step to the plate and pay for it. So do you pay for the premium up front? Yes, you do. I guess the average I could tell you is if you have, you know, $3 per thousand is the cost because they're an insurance company. So a $100,000 home, and you know you can figure it from there where your insurance premiums go, and it's $300 and up. But again, all of that is quoted to every buyer now at the very beginning on every good faith estimate. That's also no more of a surprise.
Right.
Well aware of it. I should point out that keep in mind that when you do borrow money, whether it be a purchase or a refinancing, the lender always forces you, either the purchaser or the borrower, to buy their portion of the title insurance. So you're really only buying the balance to protect yourself.
Right.
So it's nominal. It's the best thing you can do.
And I think, like you said, a lot of people look at that. I always have customers that say to me, I know I have to do it for the bank portion,